It is night in Rome. The palace glitters with torches, shadows dancing on marble walls. Within its chambers lies the Emperor Commodus, son of Marcus Aurelius, master of the world. The Senate calls him Augustus. The people call him Dominus Noster, our Lord. Statues of him rise in the forums. Coins bear his face. Inscriptions call him divine. Yet here, in the dark, there are no trumpets, no crowds, no golden laurels, only the sound of labored breathing. Because in this moment, the Emperor of Rome is dying. A slave straddles his chest, muscles taut from years of training as a wrestler. His hands grip Commodus's throat, pressing down. The Emperor thrashes, gasps, claws. He is a god in marble, but a man in flesh, soft, sweating, desperate. Narcissus is the slave's name, property of the Emperor, wrestler, servant, executioner. Commodus tries to cry out, but no sound comes. His eyes bulge, his lips turn blue, his legs kick helplessly against silk sheets. The most powerful man in the world, reduced to silence under the weight of his own slave. Moments later, it is done. Rome's god is dead. And the empire will never forget the night its master fell to the hands of a man it did not even call a man.
Act 1. The world of Rome's slaves. Empire built on chains. To understand why this moment mattered, we must step back, beyond Commodus, beyond the palace, into the empire itself. Rome was built on slavery, not as a side note, not as an accident, but as its foundation. Every conquest brought rivers of captives: Gauls, Greeks, Jews, Africans, Germans, all dragged in chains, sold in markets, branded as property. By Commodus's time, some estimates say 1 in 3 people in Italy was a slave. They plowed fields, mined silver, rowed ships, cooked meals, warmed beds. They raised the children of their masters. They bathed their masters, dressed them, fed them. They built the aqueducts and roads that carried Rome's armies. And yet, legally, they were not people. They were res, things, to be bought, sold, beaten, or killed at will. Rome's greatness stood on their backs. Its palaces gleamed with their sweat. Its armies marched because slaves carried the loads. Its emperors lived because slaves served their every need. And it would be by a slave's hand that one emperor fell. The emperor and his slaves. The irony was cruel. Roman emperors were worshipped as gods. The Senate bowed before them. The people cheered their names. They were carried through the streets in golden processions, cloaked in purple, crowned with laurel. Yet in their daily lives, emperors were surrounded by slaves. Slaves washed their bodies. Slaves fed them morsels of roasted meat. Slaves entertained them with music, laughter, and sex. Slaves held their secrets, bore their insults, endured their rage. An emperor trusted his slaves more than his generals, because while generals commanded armies, it was slaves who entered the emperor's chamber at night, slaves who poured his wine, slaves who massaged his muscles after the arena, slaves who stood closest, close enough to kill. It was the unspoken truth of Rome. The gods of empire depended on men they called less than human. The fear of rebellion. Rome feared its slaves. Every Roman knew the stories. Spartacus, the gladiator who led an army of slaves against the Republic itself, burning villas, crushing legions, nearly toppling the state. For 2 years, Rome trembled as slaves tasted freedom. The rebellion was drowned in blood. 6,000 crucified along the Appian Way, their bodies rotting in the sun. A warning etched into flesh. This is what happens when property rises. But fear never left. Roman masters feared their own kitchens, their own fields, their own beds. Because every slave was a weapon waiting to turn. And emperors, though divine in law, were not safe from that same fear. The fragile throne. The emperor was the most powerful man on earth, but power in Rome was fragile. Assassination was the empire's hidden ritual. Praetorian guards could turn on their master for gold. Senators could conspire behind marble walls. Generals could march legions against Rome itself. But a slave, that was the ultimate humiliation. For the master of the world to be struck down by his own servant was not just death, it was mockery of everything Rome believed. And yet, that is what happened. Rome believed emperors were gods. Rome believed slaves were things. But in the end, it was not the gods who triumphed. It was not the Senate, nor the legions, nor the people. It was a slave in the shadows of a palace with nothing but his hands.
Act 2. Commodus, the god who played a gladiator. The heir of a philosopher. Commodus was born in 161 CE, the son of Marcus Aurelius, the emperor remembered as the philosopher king. Marcus wrote meditations on duty, wisdom, and virtue, words that echo through time. He led armies against barbarians, endured hardship, and ruled with thought as well as sword. And yet, from this emperor of wisdom came Commodus. At first, hope was high. He was made co-emperor at just 16, the first son to inherit the purple directly in nearly a century. Rome believed he would continue his father's greatness. The empire, weary of war and plague, needed stability. But where Marcus sought philosophy, Commodus sought pleasure. Where Marcus endured discipline, Commodus indulged himself. The son of a philosopher became the nightmare of Rome. The descent into cruelty. At first, Commodus ruled with advisors, allowing older men to guide him, but soon his nature revealed itself. He cared little for governance, less for the Senate, nothing for the people's respect. He loved games, banquets, and spectacle. He spent hours in the baths, days in the arena, nights in feasting. Those who criticized him were silenced with exile or death. Cruelty seeped into his pleasures. He delighted in watching executions. He ordered men mutilated for sport. He turned trials into theater, where verdicts were foregone and blood was inevitable. Rome had known cruel emperors before, Nero, Caligula, but Commodus's cruelty was mixed with something worse, absurdity. The gladiator emperor. Commodus dreamed not of ruling, but of fighting in the arena. He trained as a gladiator, wielded the sword and trident, and demanded the people cheer as he stepped into the Colosseum. To Rome, this was madness. Gladiators were slaves, criminals, the lowest of society. An emperor, supposed to embody dignity and power, now lowered himself to play at blood. But Commodus did not play. He fought against men ordered to lose, against beasts drugged or chained. He claimed victories in the thousands, paraded himself as Hercules reborn, draped in lion's skin, club in hand. He renamed months after himself. He declared Rome should be called Colonia Commodiana, the colony of Commodus. He posed not as a man,
but as a living god. The growing hatred. The Senate despised him. Every appearance in the arena was an insult to Rome's dignity. Every proclamation of divinity was a reminder of his arrogance. Senators who dared to speak were executed. Those who survived swallowed their rage, plotting silently. The people, at first amused, grew restless. Bread and circuses could not disguise famine and plague. Commodus's obsession with games drained the treasury. His neglect of governance left provinces vulnerable, armies unpaid. Whispers grew. The son of Marcus Aurelius has become a gladiator, a buffoon, a tyrant. And among his closest circle, fear deepened. For Commodus's paranoia turned even on those who served him. Friends disappeared overnight. Advisors were killed for imagined betrayals. To live near Commodus was to live under a sword. The circle tightens. By 192 CE, Rome simmered with hatred. The Praetorian Guard, sworn to protect the emperor, grew disloyal. Senators dreamed of his fall. Even those closest to him, concubines, chamberlains, slaves, began to whisper. Because Commodus was not just cruel, he was unstable. He announced plans to appear in public on New Year's Day as a gladiator, dressed for the arena. The emperor, divine ruler of the world, intended to celebrate the new year not as a statesman, not as a god, but as a slave in sand. For Rome, it was the final humiliation. For those near him, it was the final danger. If Commodus lived, they would not. The first attempt. So the plot was laid. First came poison, slipped into his wine. But Commodus, accustomed to indulgence, vomited it out, his body rejecting the dose. The conspirators panicked. The poison had failed. The emperor lived. And so the plan changed. The slave called Narcissus. Among Commodus's attendants was a slave named Narcissus, a professional wrestler kept close by the emperor, sparring with him, entertaining him, serving as companion and servant. The irony was crueler than fate. The emperor who dreamed of being a gladiator would die at the hands of one. The conspirators summoned Narcissus. The order was simple: kill the emperor before dawn. And the slave obeyed. Commodus was no longer the heir of Marcus Aurelius, no longer an emperor, no longer even a man. He had become a spectacle, a parody, a tyrant, and on a night of whispers and fear, his life would end not in glory, but in the grip of a slave. Act 3. The plot against the emperor. A palace of fear. By the end of 192 CE, the palace of Commodus was no longer a home of luxury. It was a cage of terror. Every servant walked in silence, eyes lowered. Every senator who entered the emperor's presence wondered if it was the last time he would see daylight. Every guard slept lightly, fearful that dawn might bring an accusation, an execution, or worse, the emperor's sudden whim. Commodus's paranoia had poisoned every hall. He trusted no one, yet demanded obedience from all. He saw assassins in the Senate, traitors in the guard, conspiracies in the faces of his own slaves. And yet, in truth, the conspiracies were real. The last insult. The emperor's plan for New Year's Day was the spark. On January 1st, 193 CE, Commodus intended to march into the forum dressed as a gladiator. carrying the club of Hercules, demanding the Senate and the people bow to him as Rome's champion. It was more than madness. It was humiliation. For the Senate to bow before a man dressed as a slave in sand was an insult too deep to endure. For the Praetorian Guard, it was danger. For an emperor who mocked his own dignity, mocked theirs as well. And for those in the palace closest to him, it was terror. If Commodus disgraced himself in public, the fury of the city might fall on them. The decision was whispered, then spoken, then sealed. Commodus had to die. The conspirators. The circle was small, but desperate. Marcia, Commodus's favorite concubine, once showered with jewels, now fearing for her life after discovering her name on a list of those marked for execution. Electus, the chamberlain, a man who managed the emperor's household, who knew that his master's wrath could fall on him at any moment. Laetus, the commander of the Praetorian Guard, loyal once, but no longer willing to die for a tyrant hated by all Rome. They were bound by one thing: survival. Commodus's madness left no room for them. His reign meant their deaths, and so, before he could kill them, they chose to kill him. The first attempt. The plan was simple: poison. Marcia, trusted above all others, slipped it into his wine at dinner. As Commodus drank, the conspirators waited. But fate twisted cruelly. Commodus, sickened, vomited up the poison. He survived. Panic surged. If he realized what had been done, all of them were finished. The conspirators had no choice. They had to act that night, before the emperor discovered the truth. Calling the slave. And so they summoned Narcissus. He was no senator, no general, no courtier. He was a slave, trained as a wrestler, owned by the emperor, his body built for combat. He had grappled with Commodus in practice matches, entertained him with feats of strength, obeyed him like property. But now he was chosen to kill his master. A man the law called a thing was about to end the life of the man the law called a god. The emperor at rest. Commodus retired to his bath. He soaked in warmth, oblivious to the whispers beyond the chamber. He did not know Marcia had betrayed him. He did not know the Praetorian commander had turned. He did not know his chamberlain had opened the door to his death. He left the bath and reclined in his chamber, body oiled, muscles heavy, mind dulled by wine. Perhaps he dreamed of the arena, of the roar of crowds he would hear on New Year's Day. But the only sound that came was the footsteps of a slave.
Act 4. The Night of Betrayal. The Chamber of a God. The palace was quiet. Outside, Rome slept beneath the winter sky. Within, Commodus stretched on his couch, the air thick with incense, lamps burning low. The emperor was restless, uneasy from the poison still lingering in his stomach. But he believed himself safe. He was wrong. At the door stood Narcissus, summoned by those who had plotted their master's end. He had wrestled Commodus many times, grappled with him in sport, yielded to his strength for the emperor's amusement.
But tonight was no game. The slave entered. The struggle begins. Commodus reclined, half drunk, half drowsy, unaware. Then the shadow fell over him. Narcissus moved with speed born of fear, because if he failed, it was not only Commodus who would die, but every conspirator, and Narcissus himself. His hands shot forward, seizing the emperor's throat. Commodus's eyes flew open in shock. He thrashed, gasped, tried to roar, but no sound came. His voice, the voice that commanded Rome, that condemned senators, that declared himself Hercules reborn, was reduced to choking gurgles. The emperor clawed at Narcissus's arms, his nails raking skin, but the wrestler's grip was iron. The fight for breath. Commodus was no weakling. He trained in the arena, swung swords, fought beasts. His muscles strained, his chest heaved, his arms flailed with desperate strength. But drunkenness dulled him, surprise betrayed him, and terror consumed him. The Emperor of Rome fought for his life, but he fought like any man drowning in air. His legs kicked, his body writhed, the silk of his couch tearing beneath him. His face reddened, then purpled. His tongue swelled, his eyes bulged. Still, Narcissus pressed down. The slave's breath came in grunts, his muscles trembling with effort. Sweat rolled down his brow. This was no quick act. It was long, brutal, intimate. The silence of death. At last, the emperor's movements weakened. His kicks slowed. His hands slipped from Narcissus's arms. His body sagged beneath the weight. And then, silence. The emperor's chest no longer rose. His mouth hung open. His eyes, wide and staring, glazed with the stillness of death. The man who had once been hailed as the son of Marcus Aurelius, the master of the world, the god who played at gladiator, now lay lifeless, killed not in battle, not by senators, not by generals, but by his own slave.